The year was 1977, and the Horn of Africa was about to become a flashpoint in the Cold War. Ethiopia and Somalia, two nations with a long history of animosity, were about to engage in a brutal and bloody conflict over the disputed Ogaden region, a vast, arid land claimed by both nations. But this was no ordinary territorial war. This was a battle that would pull the world's superpowers into the chaos, transforming Ethiopia and Somalia into pawns in a much larger global struggle. The Ogaden conflict had been simmering for decades. After World War II, Ethiopia, which had sided with the Allies against the Axis powers, was rewarded with control over the Ogaden region. Meanwhile, Britain relinquished its claim on the Hod and Ogaden areas, leaving them in limbo. But in 1960, when British Somaliland merged with Italian Somaliland to form the newly independent Somalia, Mogadishu saw itself as the rightful ruler of all Somali inhabited territories, including the Ogaden, which remained under Ethiopian rule. Tensions escalated further in 1969, when Somali President Abdirashid Ali Sharmarke was assassinated in a military coup. General Mohammed Siad Barre, a hardline nationalist, seized power and vowed to reclaim Greater Somalia, a vision that included not only Ogaden but also parts of Kenya and Djibouti. Meanwhile, Ethiopia was thrown into turmoil. In 1974, Emperor Haile Selassie, the longtime ruler and revered figure of Ethiopian history, was overthrown in a bloody coup by a radical military council known as the Derg. The empire crumbled, and chaos took hold as separatist movements and internal conflicts threatened to tear Ethiopia apart. Among them was the Western Somali Liberation Front, a militant group of ethnic Somalis in Ogaden who sought to unite with Somalia. By 1977, the new head of the Derg, Mengistu Haile Mariam, had declared Ethiopia a Marxist state and aligned it with the Soviet Union. The stage was set for an explosive confrontation, one that would shake the balance of power in the region. The Somali National Army, backed by 15,000 Western Somali Liberation Front militiamen, launched a full-scale invasion of the Ogaden region in July 1977. Led by Mohammed Siad Barre, the Somalis had a bold strategy: strike fast, overwhelm Ethiopian defenses, and take full control before their enemies could react. At the start of the war, Ethiopia controlled only 10% of the Ogaden, and with Ethiopia in political disarray, Somalia saw a golden opportunity to seize the region once and for all. Armed with state-of-the-art Soviet tanks, artillery, and aircraft, the 35,000-strong Somali army was vastly superior in firepower. The Ethiopians, though greater in number, were caught off guard. Town after town fell to Somali forces. Victory seemed inevitable. But then, the unexpected happened. The Soviet Union, once Somalia's main supplier of weapons, betrayed them. Seeing greater strategic value in Ethiopia, the Soviets abandoned Somalia and threw their full support behind Mengistu's Ethiopia. They didn't come alone. The Soviets deployed 15,000 Cuban troops, along with military volunteers from North Korea, East Germany, and Yemen. Ethiopian forces were reinforced with advanced Soviet weaponry, artillery, and air support. It was no longer just Ethiopia versus Somalia. It was a global war playing out in Africa. In October 1977, with the war at its peak, Somalia launched a massive offensive to capture Harar, a key Ethiopian city. The battle was brutal. The Somali army and WSLF fighters, confident in their early victories, charged forward with tanks and aircraft. But they underestimated Ethiopia's new Soviet-backed firepower. Facing them were 40,000 Ethiopian soldiers and a staggering 11,000 Cuban troops, equipped with Soviet artillery, tanks, and MiG fighter jets. What happened next was devastating. Soviet and Cuban aircraft rained destruction from the skies, pounding Somali positions. Ethiopian and Cuban tanks crushed Somali advances. The Somali forces, once unstoppable, found themselves surrounded and systematically annihilated. In a matter of months, the tide had completely turned. By March 1978, Ethiopian and Cuban forces had recaptured almost all of the Ogaden. The Somali army, battered and humiliated, was forced to retreat. Somalia, once the aggressor, was now on the defensive. The dream of annexing Ogaden had collapsed in flames. The war left Somalia in ruins. The once powerful Somali National Army was shattered. The United States, which had initially promised support, failed to provide enough military aid to prevent defeat. Barre, betrayed by both the Soviets and let down by the Americans, never recovered from the humiliation. Within Somalia, the war had disastrous consequences. Discontent spread, leading to internal uprisings that would eventually plunge the country into civil war. In 1991, Barre himself would be overthrown and forced into exile, marking the complete collapse of Somalia's central government. Meanwhile, Ethiopia, though victorious, remained a dictatorship under Mengistu's brutal rule, leading to decades of repression, famine, and further conflicts. The Ogaden War may have lasted only 8 months, but its effects rippled across Africa for decades. It was a proxy war where the Cold War's superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, battled for influence through African bloodshed. In the end, neither Ethiopia nor Somalia truly won. Both nations suffered, both bled, and both were left broken by the war. But one thing was clear: the Ogaden region, once the center of a great battle, remains in Ethiopia to this day. The Ogaden War serves as a stark reminder of how global politics can devastate local lives. It is a chapter in history that should not be forgotten.